So I got my first dog quite late in life. So I was always a cat person. So I had a cat growing up. And then I got my first dog in 1999, actually, who was a Kelpie Collie Cross, and he was fantastic. And I remember going to a bookshop and looking up pre kind of internet access, looking up Kelpies, and it said the world's most energetic dog, and that's what he was. And he was so clever, so affectionate, so fast. We had him for 17, nearly 17 years. And I have a border collie at the moment, so I've kind of carried that sheepdog trend, and I have a chocolate Labrador at the moment as well. But he just changed my life. He was like my child, so clever. And I always think of
Wonderful.
him with such fondness, such fondness.
17 years is a long time. He must have had a good life. Where did you feed him?
He went through all of the life transitions. I think that's what's so special about your dog is they often know what we feel before we do, don't they? So that dog went through me having two children, just getting married, moving houses, career changes, massive life changes, loss, grief, everything. That dog was there. They're your staple. They're your baseline. And I don't know, it's just exercise, happiness. I just think that's the magic ingredient for dogs, that he was obviously happy with us. He was a good fit for us. We were a good fit for him. And I think, sometimes the kind of sheepdog varieties, they're quite hardy as well. So he should really have been herding cattle in Australia genetically.
Yes. Yeah.
So probably
Instead,
quite
they're in a city, in
yeah.
an urban environment.
Yeah, he used to try and herd my kids, which is really funny. So if ever I had a child upstairs, or if ever one of us in the household was upstairs and others downstairs, he would have to sit on the stairs because there's that instinct. And he used to come and get me if my babies woke up, or in the night he'd come. It's just so clever.
So cute. What was his name?
Quinn, he had my surname. That's another long story. He was really poorly when we first got him, and we hadn't thought of a name. So I had to register him at the vets literally 2 days after we got him. So I just registered him as Quinn, and then we all just went, even the vet, that's a good name. So he was Quinn. So it's lovely. That was an extra
Wonderful.
special thing. Yeah.
In that case, then going from Quinn to your other two dogs, the Border Collie and did you say Chocolate
Chocolate
Lab?
Lab, yeah. She's a little
Oh, cute.
firecracker.
Is she? How old is she
So
now?
she is 3. So that's Orla. And then I have Buddy, who's our border collie, he's nearly 7 now. He's huge. He's massive. He's like a donkey. And they get on super well. She loves him more than he loves her. So she'll follow him everywhere. And sometimes when we go on walks, he will deliberately just bolt to go get a bit of space. Whereas
Yeah.
she's like a super fan. She follows him everywhere. So it's a really good, actually, Labrador and Collie. It's a good mix. So I always have to have a big car. I used to joke and say I'm just going to tie the Hoover to my Collie molts like a Christmas tree at New Year when you just try and drag it through the house and all the needles fall off. That's him every day. But he's just, again, incredible, so intelligent and just so loving. He's just gorgeous. You can tell he's my fit. He's my soul dog.
Is he?
Yeah.
You have then had those moments where you look deeply into their eyes and you
Yes.
just know that there's something beyond it. Like they just see you.
Dog knows me inside out, back to front. So whatever kind of day you had, whatever life is throwing your way, that dog knows, and he knows what you need and what you don't need. So some days he'll just be with you, but just very gently put his head on you, because they're quite busy, border collie. I'm sure he's got a bit of greyhound in him somewhere. So there's other days where he's a bit more kind of, let's go do stuff, and nudging me towards the door kind of thing. But he always seems to get it just right.
Thing. Did you ever have any challenges with any of your dogs?
Oh, so my Kelpie, it's quite a well-known thing with Kelpies, they car chase. So when he didn't do it beyond about 3 or 4. He kind of, I don't know whether he grew out of it or whatever, but if we were on pavement walks to get to a park, or just, going out for the day somewhere, he would suddenly just want to bolt and chase certain cars. Really weird. And that was a bit of an issue, because sometimes when I had, babies and toddlers, and suddenly he'd just be going on his lead, certain cars would, I don't know what that is, maybe there's someone who can let us know at some point, certain cars would just make him want to chase them. And I see it a lot in Kelpie groups and different forums that I'm on over the years. That's the thing. So yeah, but with our 2 now, actually, no, they I think, just because we've had dogs a really long time now, thankfully. My border collie does have epilepsy, so every now and again he'll have a seizure, and that's pretty tricky to manage and see because they get longer and longer, and that can be quite hard. So then for a day or so afterwards, he's not quite himself. But apart from that, they're pretty straightforward dogs to manage, and they
Well,
give
that's
us as
good.
much as we give them. So good for
Yes,
it.
they do.
Yeah,
So I guess that question is around, those moments, because I mean, if you have a border collie legging it down the road, chasing a car, that's
yeah,
terrifying.
yeah.
How do you deal with your own emotions in those moments? Because I guess the instinct is obviously to shout because you want to protect them, you want to keep them safe, and you're slightly out of control because it's in their nature. That's what
That's
they, were bred for. So how did you cope in
And that
those
was the
moments?
hard thing because back then, so around the millennium, when we first got the Kelpie Collie cross, there weren't Facebook platforms and all these forums for people to go, car chasing is a thing with this breed of dogs. So I didn't really know, has something. I used to just kind of come from what I called older school. What I knew about dogs is something spooked him and he's running rather than, took us a little while to realize it's cars. He's chasing cars rather than something spooked him. He just wants to, because he was on a lead always with roads, just because at the time I had kids as well. So that kind of, dashing is kind of hard because you've got the immediate thing is keep safe. But my thing, and I guess that's where the kind of being a psychologist comes in, is wherever possible, trying to just helicopter back a bit and go, right, what's the behavior? What's the function of it? Because we can get very caught in that moment of, oh my gosh, something's happening. I need to stop it, which is where the more reactive stuff comes in, doesn't it? Like the shouting. And it's taking the time to go, hang on, how often is this happening? Whoa, hang on, did it happen to you? It's the cars. And sometimes our brain, what it does in threat mode, it doesn't allow us access to lovely clear thinking, which is where often we'll be able to start to piece things together, the logic, because we don't need that when we're in threat mode. So if you're able to just kind of take that time and do what we call a little behavior analysis, eventually the information will be there. Puts
It
you in
will
a
get
better
to you.
position to deal with it then, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, because I think that can be quite scary from the dog's perspective as well.
Yes.
You're
Yeah.
owner and you're just like,
And that
or
anticipatory thing that then sometimes, and I know friends who've, I've still in some, you can tell I'm still Kelpie Collie obsessed. I still am in some forums because one day you never know, I might get another one because I miss that breed. That people kind of sometimes then are a little bit hesitant about going out or where they go. So, that's a shame, isn't it? Because that breed of dog aren't suited to just pavement walks. They need to be out, they need to be running free. So it's a shame if then the behaviour means that you're more restrictive of what you do with them. So putting the
mm,
time in to understand and really work with the problem or getting the right help, reaching out. And there's no shame in reaching out because you would do with an adult human, wouldn't you? Or a life issue that we had, we would go and see someone and say, hey, this thing keeps happening. This is the impact on us. So we should do the same with our dogs. I think we owe it to
yes,
them as well.
absolutely, 100% agree with you. And also, they deserve a good quality of life. It's not that they've chosen to live in an urban environment.
So,
A dog that's supposed to be chasing sheep on a farm,
absolutely,
they had
yeah.
no choice in the matter. So putting them always on a lead when actually they're bred for running, that could be yeah, I find that quite sad actually
Yeah, I'm
from the
really,
dog's
really hot
perspective.
with my border collie, particularly. My lab is more short bursts of energy. So where I live at the moment, we're really lucky at the end of the road. There's a massive nature reserve and field. So my collie is only on the lead to cross the road for safety and then off lead. So he's not a pavement walk dog. And we don't tend to do that. He doesn't really like town centres. So we don't take him to be tokenistic. He would rather have a walk and be home while we pop to town, if that makes sense. And I kind of go with what he needs rather than what we think he should have. And I'm always, some other dog walkers sometimes will be like, dogs should always be on a lead wherever they are. And I don't agree with that. So when you're in a nature reserve, which is designed, that's where the local dog community go. And most people have lurchers, greyhounds, collies, and we've got a little community our dogs go. And they're all well trained, so they're good at, they've been socialized. They're no issue when they're around other dogs and people and kids. And that's what they need.
Yeah.
And that's what makes them happy. And hopefully
Exactly. So, by the sounds of it, I think some people don't trust themselves, or
that's,
yeah.
yeah, the
So,
human element comes in, doesn't it? That sometimes I do notice this with dog owners sometimes, that I see that anxiety and that, is your dog okay? Is your dog okay? It's their anxiety showing up, which is really normal and natural, rather than them being able to go, hang on a minute, what's happening here? Because there are some walkers who aren't dog lovers and people have different relationships with dogs and that stuff can show up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be compassionate with that.
Yes, which is also very hard. So, when, if and when we as dog guardians experience that type of anxiety, because as far as I understand it, from what I've read, that anxiety passes on to the dog. So when you have, a certain element of reactivity, not in all cases, I'm sure, that could be a byproduct of your own anxiety or nervousness, and the dog feeling they need to protect you. So, what
Absolutely,
what
yeah.
are some self-soothing techniques, I guess, in those
So
moments
do
to
you know
kind
what
of
I always
regroup?
say when we're in a kind of a threat mode, or we're noticing anxiety, our brain is designed to help us fight our feared situation or to run away. So what it means is what I said earlier, that the front part of the brain kind of switches off because it's not needed in a historical way. And that's where all of our logical thinking and our decision making and planning, the things that we usually later on will go, oh, why didn't I think about that? Why didn't I stand still? Why didn't I do this? So if you're able to, just pausing, though sometimes we overthink what we need to do, you can always, no matter what situation you're in, be in control of your breathing. And not a lot of people realize that, because sometimes when panic comes and we notice our breathing becomes rapid, hello, we can sometimes then think we're not in control, but we always do have control of our breathing. So the most simple thing you can do is stop, pause, and take an in breath through your nose really slowly. I always say maybe to the count of 3, hold it. You do it now. And then breathe out through our mouth, but making an ooh shape, like we're blowing out a candle. But again, slowly with purpose to the count of 3. And that just tells our brain, oh, it's time to calm a little bit. So it's not getting rid of. So that's always the biggest thing I tell people. Sometimes we can get this kind of cycle of, I've got to get rid of anxiety or fear or whatever. What we need to do is just reduce overwhelm enough that we get frontal lobe functioning back again, for us to go, look, this is what's happening here. So what we can end up doing is going, but I'm not anxiety free yet. It's not working. And then that builds the anxiety cycle again. So just allowing yourself to calm and soothe enough for you to go, right, got a bit more clear thinking here. What do I need to do? What decisions do I need to make? What don't I need to do in this situation? Because often with dogs, it's about what I don't want to do, and really simple stuff. But the other thing that you can do as well is tap into your body's inbuilt self-soothing system. So the fight or flight system is our sympathetic system, but underneath that, as I kind of say as a metaphor, we have our kind of inbuilt self-soothing. So that's our parasympathetic system, and it's activated by heat and touch. So if you put your hand along the
Hmm.
flat of your collarbone,
Hmm.
I don't know if this podcast is visual as well. If you can make kind of skin to skin contact, so you've got the warmth of your hand and also the physical touch, that immediately tells your brain, oh, we need to tap into our self soothing here. So doing that creates heat and warmth. So you can do it on the top of clothes, or a hug, stroking, all of that stuff works. But if the heat
Hmm.
element is there, even better. And doing the breathing as well is absolutely one of the best things, and I use it all the time, and you probably see me do it on loads of podcasts and things, because it works, it's portable, and you don't have to overthink. It's not complex rules on how to soothe. So you can do that stood in a field, just literally that's doing the work for you, because your body goes, oh, heat and touch, that's soothing, and then doing your breathing on top. And it's portable, you can do it anywhere. You can do it while you're walking along. So you might notice some people do quite often kind of move their hand along their kind of collarbone or on the back of their neck, and quite often that's because they're self-soothing without even realizing it. So our body will tap into it
Yeah,
subconsciously. So it's always a really good
that's
thing
really
to do.
wonderful.
Yeah, but also if
So,
you notice it in other people, it's also a good sign of, I wonder how they're doing. So if you're in a meeting or whatever, or you're noticing someone doing that, it's also a good indication to kind of go, I wonder how they are, and are they reacting to something in that
it's really
situation.
wonderful, actually. I'm gonna be using that
I
going
use it
forwards
a lot
when I'm
with
reading
my
other people's
sessions,
body
my
language.
animal sessions. So it's a really lovely way to help, because when people are busy and in rescue centres, there isn't time to kind of, be doing meditation apps and things all the time. It's just little quick, portable, handy things that you can do to
Hmm.
just help self-regulate during the day.
I love that, and also this is a bit of a tricky one, but as a huge dog lover, as I'm going along in my journey, I'm learning a little bit more, not just about dogs, but also about myself. And I'm able to reflect on what I used to believe, things that were passed down to me. And at that moment in time, I thought was right or correct or whatever. And as you
Yeah.
kind of go along on this learning journey, you realize, oh, I was so wrong. So when I'm out and about, I might see other people with their dogs, and I might spot certain behaviors that are not necessarily inspiring trust or connection with their dogs. And I find those moments extremely distressing. I imagine it's similar to parents and parenting. Seeing another parent shout at their child or something, it does something to us
Like a
internally. Like it's like a
visceral sometimes.
visceral
Yeah,
reaction.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in those moments, I really struggle because not only am I recognizing, I have the self awareness to go, Nadine, stop being so judgmental, but I need a tool in those moments, I think, to just ground me again because I can be like,
That's
and on
perfect.
social media, same thing. So,
Oh, yeah.
what do we do? What do we
So
do?
that's where that soothing touch to kind of ground. The number one thing that you've always got in your power as well is noticing. So as well as your soothing techniques is just going, oh, what's happening here? I always think that's just ask questions. What's happening here? I'm looking at this on social media. I've seen this happen with a dog owner in front of me. What am I experiencing? So what is it making me think? What am I feeling emotionally? What's my body doing? Oh, look, I'm tense or my heart rate's increased. Oh, I'm feeling really that. I think that's frustration or anger. What is happening here? Because that immediately just reduces that overwhelm. Because quite often it's more of a kind of an automatic thing. We'll get angry, we'll feel fearful or anxious, and then we respond. So what we kind of do as psychologists is try and get people to a point where we go, get you to noticing, right, I'm angry, I'm frustrating. And what I'm wanting to do is shout, do, remove myself, whatever it is. And we want to try and create a bit of daylight between what you're noticing and that response. And it takes time. So that's why things like right, what am I noticing here? Oh, come on, Nadine. Right, I've noticed this. I'm really wanting to write a comment, or, oh, I'm really wanting to reach for the biscuits. Because sometimes when we're overwhelmed and stressed, I want sugar. So whatever our behavioral response is, it's noticing, because that's when we'll notice patterns. And we'll also notice recurring triggers. And that's where we're in a better position to go, right, maybe I need to look at my social media use, or maybe I need to have kind of timed social media use, or maybe what I'm going to do is alter my dog walking course if I keep seeing this particular owner, because some things are out of our control. So it might be that we always see this particular person posts on socials in a way that triggers us. It might be that we always see this particular dog owner. So there may be some things that are in your control in terms of how you respond to it, but there are always going to be things that aren't. And what's most important is going, what is in my control, how I respond to this. But you can't do that until you notice. But as human beings, quite often we don't like sitting with tricky emotions and thoughts, which is why quite often we're in the doing zone. So we've reached for the coping mechanism, or we've responded, or we've snapped and said something. So also being really compassionate with how we respond is important, because sometimes we do snap and sometimes we do respond and we're not in a position to maybe catch it beforehand.
Yeah.
But if we can try, notice and name, using that self-soothing and breathing would just reduce that overwhelm enough for us, hopefully, to go, look what's happening. This is me. This is triggering me in some way, or setting off some thoughts or feelings or emotions. And
Yeah. And then what do you do with that energy?
so hopefully by then the energy is reduced. So if you're reducing kind of what we call emotional dysregulation or overwhelm, so when you're in kind of fight and flight mode, you might have a myriad of emotions. You might be fearful, anxious. So, if you're seeing a situation that you don't like with another dog owner, you could have a mixture of fear and anxiety and apprehension, because there's a part of you that might be wanting to go over and say something, another bit of you that might be fearful about doing that, or angry about what you're seeing and worried about how you would articulate it. So what we want to do is try and what we call regulate. So it's not about getting rid of or numbing emotions. It's just regulating our emotions enough for us to go, right, okay, this is showing up, that's showing up. And then the idea is that we make more purposeful choices. We make the behavioral outcome is something that we want to do, rather than more anxiety or fear driven, that we've stomped over and we said something, or we typed a really angry comment. Because what you might want to do is observe. And if there is a particular social media account that you're observing more and more often is posting stuff, you might want to make more decisions about what you want to do with that. Is it you want to contact
Yes.
them or talk to someone else about it, or you've got a concern and you need to report it, for example?
Yeah. A particular one is really tricky. I've actually come off of places like Facebook now because, particularly in dog groups, I have seen horrendous things, video clips, photos in dog loving groups or even adoption groups, like there are lots of people or groups posing as something that they are not. And in those moments, I'm like, what am I looking at? Like, how is this even possible? How was this not reported? And then you go to the comment section, and that's where you realize this is systemic. People are agreeing. People are, and I'm by no means an expert. I'm a regular human being, but some things are just common sense, and you think like, how is this possible? And I find that really, really distressing. So this is quite what you've said, in terms of the self-regulation and self-soothing, and just kind of bringing yourself back to what you can control.
Yeah.
That's the tricky thing, because in that equation there are dogs suffering, and as helpless as they might be, you feel helpless in that moment. And I think if your core wound, or whatever you want to call it, is injustice, it's so painful.
Absolutely. So that's where the kind of allowing yourself to kind of notice and name and ground allows you in a better position to problem solve. So what it might be that in a particular moment you see a video or something distressing and you want to kind of let rip on the keyboard. But what you might want to do is have a more considered approach of actually that comment at that one moment in time. Is that going to make the change that I want? That's tapping into my values here about what I think needs to happen. Because, like, you take an example like that, just kind of off the top of my head, you've got the issue with the group and you've got the individuals within the group who then may be in other spheres or working in other areas of animal welfare, and kind of you want to make a kind of a purposeful, that's the stuff that's in your control, but it's values based, isn't it? I want to create change, this isn't okay. You're noticing things like it's systemic. If we're in threat mode, we don't have access to that thinking to kind of go, hang on a minute, this group is attached to this, and who's the owner of it, and where else might these be people? You can make more informed choices, which actually then is you working with what's in your control, but still creating change, if that makes sense. So the kind of just, that's how a psychologist would just look at it, is that kind of just slowing things down, noticing that we're wanting to respond and maybe the urgency of it, and trying again to kind of bring things back to self-regulate enough to go, right, what could the outcome be here? And it might not be that we know, so we might have to kind of sit back and data gather for a bit. So then putting things like limits on social media, you might want to, if something's really triggering, keep logging on a few times a day to see the next comments and the next comments. And that actually might not be good for you because you're continually in this kind of heightened state of emotion. So what you might want to do is just set little regulators for yourself, that I'll check this group once a day. I'll look through the comments, but then what will I do afterwards? I'm going to go for a walk, do some self-soothing, that you're trying to offset. Because the other thing as well about social media is we scroll through reels, or we might not be expecting stuff. So if you're
Yes.
purposely going into that group to look at information, and you know the likelihood is there might be a video that's more triggering, for example, you're in a position to deal with that. But if you're just kind of scrolling through and you've had like most of us do in the evening, let's just have a little scroll, and then suddenly it's more acute. So you're suddenly in that fight or flight mode. So again, it's just bringing things back in. What's in my control? How often I log on? How long I spend on there? The situations where I log on. So, you're at work and you're suddenly looking, and then you've got to go and support an animal, versus I'm at home, right, I'm going to choose now. I'm on my sofa, I'm going to go in this group and look. Does that make sense? It's tiny little things, but it's just thinking about,
100%.
not doing it when you're going out the door, you're about to do a difficult
When you've just
something.
woken up,
Absolutely. Yeah. And,
yeah,
brain
that
function
sets
isn't
you up for the
restored.
day.
Absolutely. So then it also, because things like that can shift our mindset. They can, as you say, can impact hope, optimism. One of the biggest things, I've only been working in kind of animal welfare sector for about maybe 18 months ish, is I've just learned how much people live what they do. It's not a vocation. They don't just go to work and do the stuff. So people feel things and it matters to them, and it's incredible. And that's why I kind of stayed working in this sector. So these things are impacting people. It's not something you just switch off at a certain time of day. And it's learning how to look after yourself, because that happens, because everyone cares and we have big hearts and we're compassionate, because you are probably naturally more empathetic. So therefore things are going to impact you in a different way. And
Yeah,
just being
quite
kind
deep,
with that.
quite deeply.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually going on to HAWA, if you don't mind me sidestepping here, could you tell me kind of how that came about? Kind of, was there a moment, was there a pattern that you saw? What 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 initiated you starting this particular group?
Kind of a lovely story. So Mark the vet, who runs AppDog, had started, so I'm not going to take any of the credit. He noticed the trends and the issues in emotional health and asked me, would I have a look at that? And I just kind of fell into it. So I came to a couple of AppDog meetings. I was totally new. Other than having my own animals, I did nothing historically. So I'm a psychologist, historically worked in learning disability, adult mental health. I do run a CIC and support people in the voluntary sector. So all of those factors just came together, and I started to look at this, just putting feelers out, getting to know people in the sector. So I kind of joke that I've learned more in the last 18 months than I probably have in 25 years of being a psychologist, because it's such a new area to me, but I absolutely love it. So I just started through just being supported by AppDogs. I was brand new, didn't really know anyone. How do I start supporting people? And I'm really grassroots led. So I don't like coming in as a mental health professional with any of the other work I do outside of animal welfare with, this is what I think you need. Because sometimes I think that's a mistake that mental health professionals make. We think you need stuff on stress, burnout, overwhelm. I wanted to know, what are people experiencing? So I've kind of done it from top down and bottom up. So you've got my 25 years experience, me learning, talking to people, working on the kind of ground level with actual humans who work in animal welfare to go, what do you need? What don't you need? So I just started off. We did a couple of kind of pilot sessions through AppDog in December 23, I think it was. Yeah, December 23, where we just hosted a few online, what we call emotional health check-in sessions. So I just said to people, rock up on this Zoom, free to attend. And I just gave them a space to be heard and held. So that kind of model is, I just wanted people, and we had people with cameras off. And I'm sure they won't mind me sharing this because it was quite profound. And I thought, this is really bombing. They hate it and rubbish at it. They don't want this. And it wasn't until afterwards that we got feedback that people were so emotional because no one had ever really asked and provided a space for them. How are you? So it wasn't a session where we dive straight in. I do those separately now, but that's the kind of model that I work with, is providing. So for the last 18 months, once a month, I provide just a safe space, drop in online, free to attend, for people to just have a space to go, how am I? What am I noticing? And has a little bit of sprinkle of theory on top. So for people that are kind of new to the kind of world of psychology, we like to empower people over their own well-being. So you can't know how you are if you're not supported to go, how do I know how I am, if that makes sense? So I kind of just very gently support people to go, what are you noticing in your thinking, your emotions, your body? How do you respond? And that's when people can start to go, something's not right, or this is happening more often, or my sleep is actually quite poor and it didn't used to be. But also then just with that really compassionate, what are the demands of this sector? And sometimes there could be a little bit of shame and stigma of talking about your job impacting your well-being. So that's why those safe spaces are closed. They're not recorded. I don't keep logs of names of anyone who attends. So that's kind of how it started, really. So, but I also have had an ongoing survey, just a survey monkey, simple. What are you experiencing? So that kind of not being tokenistic. That's my one thing as a psychologist. Don't like being tokenistic and going, oh, great, I've just offered this stuff for you. Tick a box. Great. Is what are you, so refining. So the model just gets refined. So basically I run check-in sessions, safe spaces. I have ongoing kind of data collection, if you like, to help me know what are people experiencing, what do they need. And from that, it's just kind of developed as a hybrid thing. So I've done a lot of individual, more like webinars to help people understand these concepts. So things like grief, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, having difficult conversations, managing uncertainty and change, all of the difficult stuff that people have been through in the sector. Because quite often people might think, for example, it's just overwhelm and burnout because social media, that's the kind of on-trend thing at the moment, which great, brilliant that people are talking about well-being. But the problem is, if there's too much of something on social media, I do worry that then people will just attribute everything to that. Does that make sense? So my job is to try and empower people to go, what am I experiencing? What could this be? Because therefore you're in a better position to go, what do I need? What I don't need. So that's kind of what HAWA does, really. So we run individual sessions, but I also work with a lot of individual rescues that just need something a little bit more bespoke. So it's just an evolving hybrid. It's a wonderful model. So it's working. So I'm just trying to
Yeah.
reach, it is limited in terms of my resources. So I just reach who I can, where I can, and just making sure it's manageable. But the idea is in the long term that I roll out my toolkit so that people in individual rescues can then develop their own bespoke one with what they need. And they can just call me in to just give them a little bit of support as and when they need, as they refine it. And I love doing it. I get a lot from it.
You do.
Um,
So you're
Love it.
energized by, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So because I just do this is just something I do in my own time. It's not business. It's just a name that I've given to doing this work because I run several other projects and clinics and other things. But the idea is it's empowering people. But when you look at the logo, which was developed by another friend, it's helping humans who help animals. But when you read it in a circle, who help humans? So my job is to help the humans who help the animals, but those animals that they're caring for also help them. So it's
Yeah.
win-win.
Very
Everybody
circular. I
wins.
love that.
Because, our
Yeah.
rescue centres are so overwhelmed. They do such an incredible job. I don't think that the public really realise the demands on this sector. So if you've got overwhelmed, burnt out staff with trauma who are detached, have compassion fatigue, for example, they're not able to do the jobs in the way that they want to. So then they're also battling the shame and the guilt that comes with that. But it's the animals that also are, kind of involved in that too, in terms of the care they're getting or the number of staff that are available to work
Yeah.
or in a position to. So that's why it means a lot to me. So it's just a really tiny thing, but I'm hoping to show people that you don't have to really overthink this stuff. Sometimes we don't act, so we might notice, and that's one of the things that I love when I first met Mark, is people notice this stuff. Loads of people said, oh yes, we know in animal welfare, mental health issues, it's a really big thing, but no one had actually gone, let's start doing something. So a lot of people talk about stuff, fantastic, but it's the doing. Just try and refine. And that's why I always say with any work that I do, just start. And that's kind of what we did. And that's what I've followed through. And it's now become HAWA. And hopefully people are beginning to hear about it a
It's
bit more.
wonderful. With them, before my next question, actually, just for those who might not know, so AppDog, could you explain what that is?
Yeah, so
And
that's the all party parliamentary group for dog welfare. So they have a website, go and find it, AppDog, and you can sign up to their newsletter. All things animal welfare, the most incredible. It's the highlight of my year. They have regular meetings throughout the year at Parliament where people talk about and people do at AppDog. So,
yes,
people have different working groups that come off. They have different topics every time. It's about creating change, which is why I love it as well. So I learn a lot, but I also get a lot from it as well. I probably made a real hash up of explaining that. Sorry, Mark, but
no, no,
please
no,
look
that was
and sign up
perfect.
to their newsletter, because that's where people can create change. And that's the most important thing, because there's such a difference between talking about things and going, oh yeah, I really get that. We need to do something, and doing. And AppDog's a doer. So, sign up,
100%.
go find them.
I I went traveling through Asia and I saw the dog's plight there in various places, which was just horrendous. And obviously, I'm not in a position to just drop my life in the UK and go move over there and go help the dogs. When I came back to the UK, my eyes were wide open and I started realizing, oh, we have our own problems here as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I followed my lines of inquiry and I ended up attending the AppDog meeting from last year, October, I would say. And that's really where my education started, I feel, because I was able to gain this true insight into the state of the nation, for lack of a better word. I think
Absolutely.
that talk about the state of UK rescue really opened my eyes. I can't remember who said it, but they said rescues are completely chock-a-block full and overwhelmed. And every day, on average, they would receive, anything up to 150 phone calls for rehoming pets.
Staggering.
And when they say, I'm sorry, we're full, we have no more capacity, people will say, if you don't take my dog, I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt the dog.
Absolutely.
Hearing that all day, every day, that is just, I don't know how they cope. So that really opened my eyes. I was like, these people are angels. Like they are actual angels, looking out for
Absolutely.
these dogs and they don't
Holding all of this stuff that they're not
holding
trained
all of
to
it.
hold, and it
Yeah.
can impact mind and body. So that's kind of where I came in. I've just realised, actually, I think that's where the first seed of thought came from. The State of UK Rescue, I think it was the February 23 one, and I think it was just after that I first kind of got asked whether I'd be interested in looking at this, because people don't realise. I guess even that's part of my work is why I kind of call it hybrid. I was thinking about coming in and helping people kind of manage stress and overwhelm and burnout and those things, but actually I've learned so much that actually people are holding, and they're debriefing, they're holding the public's emotional health issues, and quite often, because of just the wonderful nature of people in this sector, they're checking out members of public at the weekend, checking in on them, holding. So it's not, it's not good for well-being in the longer term, but it's this wonderful compassion versus. So that's why I've done work around boundaries, for example, and all the almost more tricky topics of how do you look after yourself enough and put boundaries in that you still stay true to your values and your compassion, but that you're not going to end up at risk of what we call compassion fatigue, where you're just so overwhelmed and so saturated. We're like little emotional sponges, really, and we only have so much capacity to absorb other people's stuff. So I'm a therapist, psychologist. We have to have kind of important things in place to look after ourselves. I can't see people in a clinic just never ending unless I'm looking after myself. I can't, even be honest, hosting sessions and doing stuff with HAWA. I'm hearing all of this stuff and absorbing it. And sometimes it will come in an email or a session or just a chat with someone. Sometimes at App Drinks, I'm almost doing unofficial therapy because someone's just going, oh, I've just noticed this and this and this. So it's all data gathering for me, but it's
Yeah.
still things that I'm holding, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you need to look after yourself. So it's kind of also helping rescues and people not just understand these concepts, what might be showing up and the hidden things. Like the thing that blew me away this year was grief. I did a session on grief with HAWA, just kind of an open session. And then I've done some for individual rescues, and having people sit in sessions and going, oh my gosh, what I thought was stress and overwhelm is grief. And we think of grief as just being lost through death. But I had fundraising teams going, we are grieving the fact that we're not able to raise funds that we have to pass to our rescue colleagues to be able to run centres. And there's guilt and there's shame. And actually, therefore, supporting them to manage grief is effective than just going, this is stress and overwhelm. And without being rude, sometimes that tokenistic or a bit of breathing and some self-care, that's quite tokenistic, and it's quite frankly invalidating what they're experiencing. So that's kind of what my model with HAWA is that it's empowering people to understand this stuff, but also managers and helping people to support each other and having, it's really cheesy, but conversations about it, because people are holding so much, and knowing how to decompress, how to debrief if they've had a particular, some rescues, they have certain days of the week where they have euthanasias, for example, or they may have certain parts of the week where they're out in the community, people are surrendering animals, and then they're hearing staff. And I had somebody recently, actually, so I work with a lot of individual rescues, and I'm so privileged that they've allowed me kind of through the doors, so to speak, where they have charity shops. So this is all stuff I didn't know before, and I'm learning as I go. And those staff members in the charity shops for their particular animal rescue are having members of the public come in who now feel safe and have got to know them and are saying, I'm suicidal, I'm this, I've struggled. So they're doing unofficial therapy. So it's given me another arm of, right, I need to look at how I support those people. There's so many arms. And I was just thinking
Oh, yeah.
naively, rescue centre, one rescue centre, a group of people, right, how am I going to support them? So that's why the model has to be really hybrid and evolve, because you learn, I think every week I learn something new in sessions that I do, but that's how it should be. So the biggest takeaway I've had is that helping people to kind of know how trauma shows up, for example, how grief and things like kind of the detachment or compassion fatigue type territory. Because what's really interesting in my survey so far, and that's been going about a year now, trauma, compassion fatigue, grief never show up. And that just shows me that there's that mismatch between what people think they're experiencing versus what I've noticed. And that's maybe why it's useful having a psychologist involved to go, actually, I'm not sure that is stress and overwhelm. I think there's grief there, or that's actually trauma, or what we call vicarious trauma, where you're absorbing trauma from a third party. And that could be from an animal or another human. And people, those concepts aren't so widely known. As in, you see them float around on social media, but most people that I've worked with so far, it's okay to say, haven't actually been able to tell me what it means. So therefore, are they able to spot it in their rescues, in their staff, in others? So it's the biggest thing for me with HAWA is helping people to understand or to reach out if they're not sure what they're experiencing, and that they
And
don't
the
have to do it.
vocabulary.
Absolutely. And kind of normalizing it. So one of the things, the big things, and I hope this is all right to bring in a podcast, but to me, it's another big thing that I've learned is there are quite distinct generational differences. So you've got kind of the Gen Z and the Gen X divide in terms of volunteers, particularly volunteers I've noticed rather than paid members of staff, where there is a kind of a younger generation who are more likely to go, it's okay to talk about well-being and to put in boundaries, and a little bit actually more flexible with that. But you might have, if it's okay to say, that different generation who are still the very much, I call it the kind of keep calm, carry on, where we shouldn't, talking about it might mean that it's shameful or that you're not doing your job, or sometimes again that I might be judged that I'm not coping well enough. So I've
Yeah.
had to kind of start. So this is a long-term project. I'm not, I don't want to just rush in and do it in a really poor way. Starting to look at how we address some of those issues then, because what you do have, and in some rescues particularly, have a really top heavy older generation of volunteers. So therefore, you need to approach that and the well-being differently in the language, trying to reduce the kind of barriers around shame and stigma in talking about it, because people are just holding on to stuff because that's what we do.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, and hopefully just little things. I started to bring it into podcasts and public forum stuff I do with HAWA, because I think if there's just one or two people listening and kind of go, if you're a manager running a rescue and you're listening, or you're an employee going, that's what I notice, it might
Yeah,
just start some
absolutely.
conversations and reduce
Yeah.
a bit of stigma, hopefully.
And not just animal welfare at the end of the day. I think a lot
Absolutely.
of us didn't grow up having the vocabulary to express how we
Absolutely.
feel.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
even know how we feel. We just know that, oh, I've got an icky feeling in my body and I can't shake it. And you said before about, it might be a bit cheesy, but just having a conversation, I think that is
Absolutely.
probably the single most important thing that could be happening in our day and age. I listened to a podcast in which they use the term um, social atrophy. And I never thought about that before, but because our communities are mostly online now, we
Absolutely.
kind of
Yeah.
live online. It is so powerful. It can be so powerful just having a conversation with someone in real life, and we take it for granted. We actually really do. So what you're offering with regards to the drop-in sessions, I think is probably going to be so powerful, because here's the thing: I have a rescue worker who actually presented at the AbDog State of the UK Rescue session, and it's been impossible to pin her down. We've been speaking and she's agreed to come onto the podcast, but whenever I see she's just constantly working with dogs, there is no respite. So she replies to me at 1, 2 o'clock in the
Really
morning,
powerful
and I
stuff,
just
right?
yeah, and I just think like this is so important. What you do is so important. And I guess my question within that is, if you could kind of rally the troops and speak to all psychologists, or social workers or therapists across the land, even people thinking about joining your line of work, what can they do to prepare to kind of like not, yeah, maybe specialize? Because this is much needed.
Yeah. Do you know the biggest thing that I've learned, I've got it wrong as I've gone, and I hold my hands up as well, is that sometimes we can go in, I think I've got an idea of what people need. And even though I'm someone who likes to ask questions, it's really taking the time to ask those questions. And the biggest thing that I have learned, so as a psychologist, when we're doing what we call a formulation of someone's presenting issue, what we will look at is what areas might we want to make change. So if you've got someone in a big corporation, for example, who is consistently stressed, overwhelmed, dealing with a lot, you might go, actually, is this the industry for you? What changes can you make in your job? The biggest thing I've learned is people live and breathe animal rescue. They're not going to leave and go and do a different career, but it's probably the most probably sounds really silly, but it's the most mind-blowing thing for me. And I discovered that really early on, that people will stay to the point where their body has gone no more. And I learned that from a woman that I did an interview with who had a heart attack due to stress. And it was a really profound conversation, because it made me realize, gosh, I think I would have missed that, because there was a part of me that's kind of trained to go, if this is a continual stressor, maybe we need to look at the industry you're in. And that's quite commonplace. But in this sector, no. So you take your time to understand the sector, not just the going straight into what are the emotional health needs. Does that make sense? So I'm still learning. It's why I absorb the AppDog meetings. I keep talking about them, but I don't just go to get contacts to be able to do this work. I go to hear and understand not just the issues showing up, but the people. Why do these people that stand up and talk do this day in, day out? Why do they do it even when their bodies are struggling? Because it's the meaning. So that's the biggest thing for me. And that's, to be honest, why I've had some issues in terms of recruitment and retention of people helping me, is getting people who really get the sector. Because there's a certain type of patience needed, a certain kind of taking the time to really learn. Does that make sense? What people need?
Absolutely.
It's not a thing you can just come in and do and run some sessions. And that's what I've noticed and had to refine. And it's why mostly it's me doing the work, because it's finding the right fit. You don't want somebody who doesn't really understand the sector, because it's really invalidating and minimizing. And actually that's just going to add to the problems.
I think that's really hard, actually, when you think about using a blanket response or a blanket solution or perceived blanket solution for something that
We're a
has
quick
run
fix
so deep.
society now, aren't we? So we're kind of, you look on Instagram, it's all click here for this app and reduce anxiety in 4 sessions and do this. And there is, by the nature of the human condition, we like quick fixes to things, right? But
Easy.
in this sector particularly, I've had to, and I'm quite a doer. So I, get a project, I run with it and I do. I'm not a talker, I'm a doer. But what I've had to really, really try hard with in my work with HAWA is not rushing, getting it right, because you really do need to sometimes just get a bit of paper and go, right, what have I done so far? What am I noticing? Why is that not working? Because you can just get in, you could just run sessions and go, right, we'll just do this. Or I just continue run emotional health check-in sessions, but you need to keep, and that's, I guess, where the legwork comes in, got to keep eye on the ground and noticing what's working and refining and refining. So even as this model's gone on, what I'm noticing more is it's the work with individual rescues that's actually quite profound. And that may be the model going forward, that although there are commonalities and things that they may be able to log on and benefit from HAWA in a central portal of what I offer, it's going into rescues individually, talking to the members of staff, doing sessions, splitting managers up. I've done sessions where we split fundraising from charity shops to shelter staff, for example, and that's worked really well. And if I just stuck with one model of, book in and everyone book in and I've got everyone the same, that's not working so well for some rescues, whereas others it might. So does that make sense? So it's kind of just, and it's putting the time in, it's not rushing, it's not doing anything. So we don't want to just keep talking about it. You don't want to have the State of UK Rescue 2023 and then 2 years time we're still talking about we should do something. So I guess it's that, the podcast host, it's Stephen Bartlett.
Yes.
He says that, just you need to start, and it's all safe because I'm a qualified regulated psychologist. I have my risk assessments, have all the stuff that's outside of the sessions. But just start, do and refine. And you'll notice I've tweaked and things change. And I'm about to do a couple more changes towards the end of the year and how the check-in sessions work, because I'm not reaching the amount of people I need to due to times and the format. So I need to revise it. And that's me in a nutshell. So kind of going forward, HAWA will always be an evolving thing to meet the demands of this sector. And hopefully we get there.
Oh, you absolutely will. But what is the vision for it? I know that you're working on this toolkit, but how are you going to reach the masses?
So what I would love, my absolute dream, and maybe someone's going to listen to this and they can help me. I would like to get my toolkit rolled out. So it's kind of like a template, but then individual rescues take what they need from it. So I do quite a lot of work with Hope, for example, and Greyhound Rescue Wales. I've done some things with, I kind of started to use some of the individual organisations almost like little mini pilots of what works and what doesn't. Is that rescue going, right, we need more of this, less of this. Oh, we're looking at this and we're wondering how. So almost like having a toolkit that you can then adapt for your individual organisation. And I say organisation because it might not be a rescue, it could be anything animal welfare. I've kind of broadened out who I provide support to. But then you have like a consultancy model, which is more manageable for me, where maybe through email or a Zoom session or whatever, that I can just go, right, what else have you thought about? How does that work? So what I would really love is, I can't get round to all of the rescue centres in the UK, that's just impossible, and it would be tokenistic and I'll burn out, is whether I can get little mini versions of me locally. So people who get it, who might have then time pro bono to go in and just do a bit of that consultancy or just help with some practical tweaks or a couple of mindfulness sessions or whatever it is, which is a little bit like what we've done with Hope. That would be my dream going forward. And that's the more efficient model. So then you're helping the community to help. So if you've got local people going in, it doesn't have to be psychologists, it can be anyone in the kind of well-being field that come in, but then they've got a model. So they're not having to do it cold, if that makes sense. So I've got a model that they can then implement for their individual. And I'm quite happy to oversee it and do supervision or consultancy or whatever to make it work. And that's more efficient then, because they're empowered over their own organisation. So that's the dream. So if anyone's listening and wants to run away and do it, great, or help me, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Would it even be an option to potentially recruit rescue workers to go into the kind of it's not care, what is it, mental health fields, like give them the training in order to do, because they have that first-hand insight, don't they?
That kind of, there's a lovely push now for more what we call lived experience, so having somebody actually reached out on LinkedIn recently that I need to meet with, kind of talking about exactly this. So what's really lovely now, I've noticed that, a lot of people talking about it, and then things like LinkedIn has been amazing because you can just get either tagged or you can notice a conversation and go, hey, let's have a Zoom, let's chat. So that's where a lot of these connections have come from. And things like this, talking at AppDog, is maybe bringing in more lived experience of what you can get. It's really empowering, is maybe a model where you've got people in individual rescues that almost want to be the wellbeing champion, not mental
Yeah.
health first aid, because that model, to me, that has its place in certain organizations, but more of a kind of a champion who might want to kind of help to push this forward, but with that lived experience to kind of go, this is what works, this is what doesn't, this is what we need.
Yeah. And then feeding that back, and the model keeps evolving as a result of that
Absolutely, which
feedback
it
loop.
should do. So that's the
Yeah.
essence of, because psychology is the science of mind and behavior. So it's not static, this is what we think you need. It's the right, what's working, what's not. Let's test it out, let's refine it. And not everyone is good at being vulnerable. We don't like to be seen to get stuff wrong. So sometimes if I'm revising the model or I've moved something around, I've gone, oh, that's not working, I think, oh, people are going to think I'm not good at this. And you have to really work hard to be vulnerable, if that makes sense, to kind of go, it's okay, some stuff's not going to work, or I'm not going to get it right for some rescues, or going to have to refine the model or look at something different. And that's how it should be. So sometimes you just have to lean in and make room for your own kind of imposter syndrome showing up. And it's just also trying to get known in the sector as well. So kind of I've been trying really hard. I'm speaking at conferences and things, and I have done, and also having platforms, people allowing me to kind of talk a little bit more about emotional health, which I really appreciate, because that's then when people can hear more about the work we're doing and hopefully want to get involved and
Amazing.
implement it.
Yes. And what about the general public, if you had a message to them?
Do you know what? It's compassion. So sometimes people think compassion is really woo-woo. It isn't. There's a huge scientific basis behind compassion. You're a member of the public. So I thought of this the other day when I did a session for a rescue centre that has shops, charity shops, that you have members of the public who are giving their stuff, for want of a better word, to people in the shop. They're holding all of that stuff, and just being mindful that that's a human being. When you're, if you're in a really difficult situation, you're having to surrender an animal, or you're going somewhere and someone's, we're humans, right? We have dynamics. It's just trying to dig into that compassion where you can, that person in front of you who might say, we have no capacity, isn't trying to do that to harm you, hurt you, to purposely cause you distress. It's just trying to, bit like in coffee shops. So these days I try so hard. Sometimes if you get someone that's a little bit snippy, your gut instinct is a bit rude. Like, I had someone the other day, I had my headphones on, it's my decompression after clinic, so I wasn't paying attention when it was my turn in the queue, so I was slow, and I appreciate that's irritating, but what I got from this gentleman behind me was rude and abusive, rather than going, I wonder why that woman was distracted. And there's a bit of me going, I've just seen 5 people in a row, some of trauma and loss and all sorts of stuff. So I'm listening to my headphones, and I'm really sorry that for a moment I was just not paying attention. Does that make sense? That compassion, that if we can just
Oh,
go for a
100%.
moment, even to the snippy person, why would that person snap? I wonder what's happened for them today. And I know it's not realistic to be able to do in all situations, but any member of the public dealing with anyone, animal welfare, campaigners, whatever it is, because that's the other thing that I've really noticed as well, is that there are so many people doing wonderful campaigning, and they also are dealing with members of the public and opinions on social media, and also it's just try and turn up your compassion radar.
Yeah.
Be considerate.
Really, really important.
Cheesy,
really powerful.
be kind, be considerate.
Be kind and considerate. Yes, because those people have families too, and there's a knock-on effect that just keeps going. It's infinite, right? Everyone has some sort of connection or someone that depends on them in some way, even if it's energetically speaking.
And the other thing I've just realised as well, inform yourself. So you might think, well, why do you need these dog welfare groups? Why do you need campaigning? Why do rescue centre staff need emotional health support? At the moment, there's a lot of, but we're all struggling because there's a lot of stuff been happening since the pandemic. Is just inform yourself, because sometimes ill-informed opinions then get spouted, put onto other people. Is take the time to learn. Why is that person sharing that petition? Why is that person talking about this issue? Why are we hosting this group? Why are we doing? Educate yourself. Ask. We can always ask questions and learn, and that helps our decision making and hopefully our compassionate responses. Because I've been a receipt of it. Some people going, you're so busy, and no wonder you're, sometimes I'm a bit stressed, or I forget, or checking email. You do too much. Why don't you not do that stuff, rather than going, why is it that I might be taking on animal welfare pro bono in my own time, it's because it matters. And actually, it's really good for my well-being. It's the one thing that really does top up. Does that make sense? I always think that's a really good example.
Purpose.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. That
absolutely.
people might be very quick to judge and kind of go, oh, just don't do it, because they're ill-informed as to why it's so important that it would make me keep doing this work in my own time. That's how I say, if you can be anything, be compassionate and inform yourself. Take the time to learn and ask questions. It's free.
And also, I guess to some degree, be kind to yourself. I find that when I'm really hard on myself, I'm harder on other people. So
Oh,
I always, in
absolutely.
those moments,
Yeah.
try and reel it back a bit and be like,
And if you
be nicer
can't,
to yourself.
find a dog and stroke it. Always works.
Touch grass.
Literally, yeah. Feet on grass. So I'm just like, wherever I am the person who's like, oh, is your dog okay if I say hello? And you can always instantly feel better. If you're in a
Exactly.
coffee shop queue and there's a dog, ask whether you can say hi. Because
Exactly. And ask the dog.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like always, if I meet a dog, I always feel better. I think Ricky Gervais
Same.
is famous for saying that, isn't he? That just he can't walk anywhere without just saying hello, and how good it is for you to just spend time. Particularly, I'm a cat person too, cats too. But when you're out and about, all these wonderful dogs to say hello to if they're okay with it.
Yeah, it's really special, and their little tails wag, and they get so
Immediately.
excited, and you're like, "Oh my god, you don't even know me!" But it doesn't matter
I
because we're
call
just so
them
happy.
a magic mental health button. They are the one thing that you know, as long as it's all right with the owner. You checked. God,
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
I can't
And-
go
and the-
anywhere into town without bumping in. This is a really massive dog caution. It's a big dog town. So it's great. I'm always stopping and saying hi. And it's lovely.
Amazing. You're in Horsham, so you're not very far from me at all.
Yeah, I am. I'm in Horsham. Yes, yeah. Where are you?
Yeah. Worthing.
Oh, so you're literally down the road. You get to
It's
see.
literally down the road. We are doing amazing things in West Sussex.
Oh, we
I love
are. East Sussex and West Sussex. We're like a little hub of activity, aren't we? So, which is lovely.
Amazing. Oh, this is so wonderful. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
Thanks for having me on.